Number 69. Yes, there's an afterlife, but no, there's no God. That's what I believe. That's the subject of today's video. As always, please like or comment on this video. Click the subscribe bell. That all those things help other people to see these videos. So I'm odd. I know I'm an odd duck in this regard, but I've always believed in an afterlife, but I've never believed in God. That's how I was raised. I've examined that as an adult. I still believe that. It's not unusual for Native Americans to believe that. The way I was raised was heavily influenced by the Hopi people, Hopi Native American tribe. There are some Native Americans who believe, there are some tribes that believe in the Great Spirit. They are in the minority. Most of us do not, or most people who either are Native American or were heavily influenced by them in their upbringing don't believe that. We believe in an afterlife, but not in God, especially the way Westerners understand, like one male, all divine, powerful being. So it was very recently, 3-ish years ago, it was just before the pandemic, that I found out that atheists, at least in North America, I knew they didn't believe in God, but I thought they were only taking God out of the afterlife equation. Turns out they don't believe in both God and an afterlife. Those are very combined for a lot of atheists. And I thought, okay, for all my life up to that, I thought they were like me, where of course they believed in an afterlife, but they didn't believe in God. Those two things have never gone hand in hand for me. And so I was the guest speaker at a UU church, a Unitarian Universalist church, and I was talking about mediumship that day. And afterward, a few atheists approached me and said that it had never occurred to them that those two things, God and an afterlife, did not have to go hand in hand, that they could be separated. So the memory of that and some other things prompted the making of this video. And what I want to say is, if there are skeptics in your life, or in your personal life, or if one comes along for a reading, well, like a spouse or a friend comes with your client, maybe broach the subject that maybe it's possible that there is such a thing in an afterlife, that the atheist is right about not believing in God, but maybe there is an afterlife, and how those two things don't have to go together. Because a lot of people who don't believe in mediumship, for example, like atheists don't believe in mediumship, not because they think you're a fraud or because you're kidding yourself, but they don't believe in an afterlife. And so mediumship automatically is an impossible thing. It has nothing to do with you. Lots of the atheists that I know, and I know a lot of atheists, are ex-something, ex-Catholic, ex-Mormon, ex-whatever. But even though they're ex-whatever, a lot of them still look at this subject through what I would call the subject of the afterlife and the spirit world through a very Western biblical lens, certainly not a Hopi Native American lens. Even if they're no longer part of a faith tradition, or if they were never a part of a faith tradition, if their parents were ex-something and they were raised as atheists. So in my experience, for example, atheists they've never said to me, I don't believe in gods and goddesses. They've always said to me, I don't believe in God. Which in and of itself is a very Western biblical framing of what, if anything, exists before and after this physical life. A sticking point for lots of people who do not want to believe in an afterlife is that they already believe, from their Western biblical framing, that an afterlife or spirit world would include environments like heaven or hell or both, and who gets to decide the criteria for where everybody ends up? That really bothers a lot of people. And that's where that stubbornness about there is no afterlife and therefore mediumship is impossible, that's where that comes in. So I sit regularly in a group that used to meet in person, now meets online, and we always have guest sitters. I've talked about this. We have guest sitters that are non-mediums. They know they're there to be practiced on. And so a few years ago, when we were meeting in person, the person who sat for us was the neighbor of the person whose house we were at. He was an atheist. He was a skeptic. He believed in psychic phenomenon, but because he was an atheist, he automatically believed mediumship was impossible. And so he was looking for psychic hits. And he kept calling them hits, like that's a hit when you connect with somebody, right? So this guy comes in and he lays objects down that I knew they belonged to dead loved ones of his, and something in me just said, don't touch them, don't touch them, don't touch them. Everyone else handled something. I didn't touch anything, like necklaces, books, things like that. And so everybody read, we all got his family, but I got his family. I got people who really loved him, just like everyone else in the circle, but I hadn't touched anything. And his rationale was that they were doing psychometry. The other mediums in the room were doing psychometry. They were getting psychic impressions off of the objects. I hadn't touched anything, and that really threw this guy, because I clearly got some relatives who really, really loved him. And so he didn't know what to make of that. We're now Facebook friends. We're on a friendly basis when we see each other, if I happen to be at that person's house, and he's good friends with her and neighbors. But I know that he refers to me as that spooky guy. That's what he calls me, because it threw him. So especially if you are an atheist, I encourage you to uncouple those ideas, God and an afterlife. Maybe you're right. Maybe there is no God. But does that automatically follow that there is no spirit world? I don't think the two have to be absolutely entwined. So examine that. You Western biblical framer, you. Next week, I know this is really short, but that's all I have to say. Next week, I'm going to talk about how your attitude matters. When you are a medium and you're doing a reading, your attitude about life, your emotional state, your attitude about mediumship and about your ability, it matters. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Thanks for watching this time. As always, like this video, comment on it below, click the subscribe button. And until then, see you next week. Thank you for watching this time.